We're going to chant the Gatha opening the sutra. You want to do the Eno? The Dharma incomparably profound and infinitely subtle is rarely encountered even in hundreds of thousands of millions of ages. Now we see it, hear it, receive and maintain it. May we completely realize the Tathagata's true meaning. Can you hear me online? Koan case 35 from the Gateless Gate, or the Mumonkan. Seijo's soul is separated. And the koan, Koso asked a monk, Seijo and her soul are separated. Which one is the true Seijo? And Mumon's commentary, if you realize the true one in this, you will understand that getting out of one shell and entering another is just like a traveler staying at an inn. If you have not realized it, don't rush about wildly. When earth, water, fire, and wind are suddenly about to decompose, you will be like a crab which has fallen into boiling water and is struggling with its 7 arms and 8 legs. At that time, don't say, I didn't warn you. The verse, the clouds and the moon are the same. Valleys and mountains are different from each other. All are blessed, 10,000 times blessed. Is this one? Is this two? Good morning, everyone. We're well into the Sesshin. I know that because I can't remember what day it is anymore. So you should be fairly well settled now, and samadhi gets stronger the more we sit. You will notice that the periods seem to get a little shorter. Time is completely subjective. And this is an interesting koan because it's actually taken from a folk story that was a very old Chinese legend from Tang, China. So in order to have the context for the koan, you need to know the story that it's taken from. So there are different versions of this story, but I'll read you one version. Once upon a time in the province of Ko, there lived an old man named Chokan, and Chokan loved his daughter, Sei, very much. She was very beautiful, and Chokan used to tease her when she was still a child, saying that her beauty matched that of her cousin, the handsome Ochu. Just about the time that the two cousins realized they were in love, Chokan announced his choice of another man as the husband for Sei. The young lovers were heartbroken. Ochu left the town, setting off in a small boat. He had rowed a distance when he noticed someone running along the bank, waving to him, and to his great joy, he found that it was Sei who had followed him. They decided to travel to a far-off land and make a life together. A few years later, when Sei had become a mother of 2 children and Ochu had established himself, she realized for the first time how deep her parents' love was, and her conscience began to bother her about the way she had treated her father. She had left without, they had just eloped without saying anything. And her husband, Ochu, also regretted that he had done this to Sei's father, and they decided to return to the homeland and ask his forgiveness. When they arrived in the province of Ko, Sei remained in the boat, while Ochu went to apologize to Chokan and tell him what had happened. The old man listened incredulously. Finally, he asked Ochu whom he was talking about. And the young husband replied, "Your daughter, Sei. We left without your permission. I'm coming back to apologize, and she's down in the boat." And the father said, Sei never left home. Shortly after you went away, she became ill and is still confined to her bed. She hasn't uttered a word since you left. "You must be mistaken," Ochu replied. "Sei followed me, and we went together to a far-off country. We're married and have 2 children. She is in excellent health and wants to see you again and ask your forgiveness for running away and marrying me without your permission. If you don't believe me, come down to the boat and see for yourself." The old man was reluctant. So Ochu went alone to bring Sei back to her father's house. In the meantime, Chokan went into the bedroom to tell the sick Sei what had happened. Without a word, the invalid rose from her bed and rushed out to meet the approaching Sei, and the two became one. Chokan said to his daughter, "Ever since Ochu left, you have been dumb and lifeless as though your soul has fled." Sei told him, "I didn't know. I was homesick in bed. When I heard that Ochu left, I followed his boat as if in a dream." So that's the legend. There are various versions of this, but the question this koan puts to us is, who is the real Sei? And it's a good koan because it catches you right away. You immediately think, well, which one is the real Sei? And your mind wants to say, well, it's one or the other, right? It's the one that was left behind. No, it's the one that left. And a koan, I don't think I can think of any koan in our tradition that ever has been one or the other as the answer. It's always an and, always. How can that be? Your rational mind can't figure that out. Who is the real Sei is another way of asking. Who is the real you? Who is your true self? Who are you? Who am I? That's the question that Zen puts to us. It's the most important question. The most important. The whole tradition is about that. And Sensei gave a wonderful talk yesterday. And the question she left us with was, what are you willing to do to be free? What are you willing to let go of to be free? You have to let go of letting go to be free. You have to let go of the one who's wanting to let go. Freedom is enlightenment, is liberation. That's the good news of Zen. We have good news, we should proclaim it. We can be enlightened, we are enlightened. We can be enlightened, we can realize it, we can clarify it, we can live an enlightened life. But what you think enlightenment is not what it is. Whatever you think enlightenment is, it's not that. It's not an experience. How can that be? There's no one to experience it. We chanted the Heart Sutra this morning. The sutra on the relative and the absolute. All you have to do is read those two sutras. It's all there. It's all there. And when the Heart Sutra proclaims at the end, does a little marketing and said, this is the best mantra, the supreme mantra, it's right. It is. The Heart Sutra. That's the supreme mantra. You get that mantra, you've got the teaching of Zen. And notice that in the Heart Sutra, always in the teachings, when we're talking about emptiness, there is always prajna nearby. The two go together, like the two says. You can't have one without the other. Prajna, cutting wisdom, cuts any separation, any division, any duality. The sword of Manjusri, the bodhisattva of prajna wisdom, is always two-edged. It cuts this, it cuts that. Cuts subject, cuts object. No thing, nobody. We are not somebody. We're wanting to be somebody, but that's why we suffer in a way. So the first point here is really important, that again, it's this teaching of not to. The same teaching that was in the first case of the Blue Cliff record about Bodhidharma. Not to. And that's subtle. Your rational mind can't conceive of it, but you can experience it, and in a way you can't, because there's no experience. If there's somebody experiencing it, then there's still something extra. We are sticky. Our minds are sticky. We stick to things. We stick mostly to ourselves and to our various identities, our roles. So it's important to appreciate that always, when we're talking about this not to, we're talking about both that I want to say experience, but the experience that no one experiences, where there is no thing. We are not objects. You are not a noun. We are a process. We are interrelated. We are completely relational. There is no somebody here. We're all going to die. We're not going to be here forever. We're not permanent. Get that. This moment, it's already gone. Past. There's no past. There's no future. There's not even a present. It's already gone. Waking up is this, just this. Now this. Now this. And what gets in the way is we're sticky. We divide, we separate, we name. So in one sense, there is no division. We are all in the same ocean. We are all the same ocean, and there is no separation. There's no division. There's no self. There's no birth. There's no death. There's no time, no space. That is enlightenment. That's the good news. And we shouldn't be afraid to speak about it, though it's difficult to talk about it because words are dualistic. So that's the first thing that this koan is inviting us to clarify, is to really see what is the true Seijo? Who is the true self? Who is your true self? You can't get at this conceptually because the conceptual mind is intrinsically dualistic. But you can get at it, especially at this point in a Sesshin, when you're really settling down, you begin to see the point. This. Not this and that, just this. No reference point at all, because that's how we create ourselves, is by creating reference points, by duality, this and that. That's how I think that I'm here, right? This and that. I grab onto dualistic reference points, always. Me and you, me and the world. We separate, we divide. So, but that, notice that in the Relative and Absolute Sutra that we chant every morning, it also says in that sutra, enlightenment, the absolute is not enlightenment. So we're speaking about the absolute here, but this is not yet enlightenment. The teaching of shunyata and emptiness is form is emptiness, emptiness is form. So we are also completely different from each other. Each one of us, beautifully unique and wonderful. No one has had your life experience. No one had your parents. We all had different parents, didn't we? We all grew up in different places. We've all had different life experiences, and it makes us, it's part of who we are. So we are both nobody and somebody at the same time. And that's this not to. So I often emphasize the psychological because I think this is where we work a lot in practice. So all the things, much of what Sensei was talking about yesterday, about identity and the grief and the need for diversity, is all a really important part of practice. So now I'm going to talk about the token again, the broken token, because now we're talking about the experience that we also have of growing up and trying to find out who we are, and part of that has to do with our identity and the roles that we take on. So that's also in this koan. It's also here. Because Sei leaves her father, elopes with her lover, makes a life for herself. Her husband makes a living. Maybe he took the civil service exam, which was common in China, got a job in the bureaucracy in the government. She had 2 kids, and then she had the same thing that we talked about before in the first koan from the blue, that regret. She started to regret the way she had treated her father. She left without getting his permission. Not good. Not good. She comes back. The token was broken. You see? That's real too. She had to come back to make it whole. Now, on one level, the token is never broken. That's the absolute side. It's never broken, no matter how damaged, how wounded we are, how traumatized we are, how much suffering we have, we are always whole. You are intrinsically awake. You are already the Buddha. You can't find it anywhere else. You can't get it through your willpower. You can't get it by trying to let go. There's nothing to let go of. You're just looking in the wrong place. It's right in front of you. Stop looking for it. It's already here. That's the good news. And at the same time, we have to find our way in the world. That's also part of this teaching of emptiness. And that's where the token gets broken and has to be put back together. So there's so many ways we could talk about this, and I know you can relate to this. Every one of you can relate to this. So I'm going to give you some examples, and you'll get what I'm talking about. You grow up in a family, and you find at very early age that you love poetry, and you say to your father, who is dismayed to hear this, that I want to be a poet someday. And your father says, "Oh, I'd counsel against that. That's probably a bad thing. You're not going to make much money. You won't be able to establish yourself in society. I want you to be happy. I want you to be successful. I want you to be a banker." You want me to be a banker? Now you have to choose, don't you? As you get older and you're starting to leave the nest, what are you going to do? You're going to play it safe and become a banker, which you could do. You could make that choice. People make that choice. Or you could risk being a poet. And you might be really poor, and you might live a miserable life, or you might live a wonderful life. There's no guarantees. There's no insurance here. This is real life. You don't know. No one's going to tell you how the outcome is. It's up to you. No one's going to save you. You decide. You become a banker. You raise a family. You're highly successful. You make money. You have a house. You have a good house. You have a big house in a good zip code. And everyone is proud of you. Your parents are proud of you. And then one day on Monday morning, when you're going off to work, when you're 37, all of a sudden everything is empty. Not empty like shunyata, but you are dried up. And you don't know why you're going to work. You don't know why you're doing this, and a depression sets in. You don't know where it's coming from, but the depression is there. This what you're doing doesn't mean anything to you. You've made all these things. You've done everything you were supposed to do. You've been a good son, and still you're depressed. Can you relate to this? Happens all the time. Now, the other possibility is you break with your father. You go off. Try to be a poet. You mostly spend your time waiting tables in restaurants. You want to be an artist. Really hard to make a living as an artist. Got to be brave. Got to work really hard. It's not going to come easy. And you do that, and you find your way. You might be poor. You might be fine. You don't know. But no matter what happens, at some point, you're going to feel some kind of, hopefully, maybe not, but at some point you might feel like, you know, I kind of have not been close to my father for the last 15 years, and I need to repair that because there's something, the token is broken. And I need to put that back together so that I feel whole, because as Sensei said the other day, everyone I see is my father. I am my father. I thought I wasn't. My father's a businessman, and I hated him for being a businessman. I'm a poet and an artist, but I'm so much like my father all of a sudden. He's in me. So I feel some regret. I feel, and he's not dead yet. He hasn't, and I have an opportunity. It's Christmas time. I think it could be really painful, but I'm going to go home. I haven't seen him for 10 years. It'll be, I'm scared. Don't know how it's going to go. I'm going to go home. And you go home and you repair that relationship. That would be the good scenario. You make that, you bring that token together. And we all have these kinds of experiences with our identity, who you are in terms of your sexuality, in terms of your role in life, your vocation, being a parent, being a teacher, being a student, being an employee, being a boss, a supervisor. All of those are roles that we take on, and they're not insignificant. But if you get frozen in the role, you will not do well. It doesn't matter what the role is. If you get teachers, it happens all the time. I know this from my own tradition, that Zen teachers get caught by the projections that are directed towards them by students, and it can be very lonely to be a teacher. And often some of the abuses we have seen in our own tradition happen because teachers they're just lonely, and they're caught by the projections, and they can't step outside of the role that is being projected onto them. And whether you're a teacher or a student, a wife, a husband, a nurse, a doctor, a teacher, a mother, you have to be able to see that you're playing a role, and it's not all of who you are. Parents get stuck with this all the time. You get stuck with, I have to be a responsible parent, and then you lose, you give everything to your kids, and you have nothing left over for yourself. That's not healthy. Very hard not to do that. So you see all these are things we also have to negotiate, and they're real. Our identities they're not something that's a fiction, it's actually real, and they matter. And I think for young people in our culture, the identities are getting more complicated. And it's easy to just discount that and say, oh, we're Zen practitioners, it's all one, we don't need to worry about that. No, that matters too. Enlightenment is not about just not knowing. It's not no self, it's also self. What's the true self? What is your true self? That's the question and the challenge of this koan. You see your true self, then you are free. And the warning that is given here in Mumon's commentary, when it comes a time for you to die, to pass on, you don't have to be so scared. You're not losing anything because you never gained anything. There is no death, no birth. The token has always been whole. It always will be whole. And that is something we can rely on and count on. And that makes all the difference in the world, if you know that. And our practice is to see that, to be able to have faith in that, and to know it. And I think the part about practice here is that you will doubt that. You absolutely are going to doubt this teaching. In fact, you can't clarify it, I think, without being really honest and saying, I don't know if this is so. You have to say that to yourself. I don't know if the token is whole. It feels kind of broken to me. And you can get stuck there. But you can also get stuck with the whole token if you get attached to enlightenment. It's a Zen sickness. It happens to students. You discovered this freedom, and it's so seductive that you just don't want to go back and deal with the self. You don't have to deal with the painful kind of bearing witness to the differences. That's too much tension in that. That's painful. But we also have to do that. What comes out of not knowing and bearing witness is loving action, compassion, kindness. It's a beautiful tradition we have here. It is, I'm always amazed at how deep and how profoundly relevant it is to the life I'm living. I can tell you my own story. I won't make it too long, but I think I'll tell it to you because I think you'll find in my story yours as well. That when I began Zen practice in my early 20s at the Zen Center Los Angeles, I was very young and immature. And Maezumi Roshi was grooming me to go to a monastery in Japan. And I was studying Japanese at a local community college. I was all ready to go. But I was young and I was rebellious and I was emotional and impulsive and I was kind of artistic, but I didn't really know it. And I was kind of acting out and against authorities. And I loved Maezumi Roshi. He was like my father. I lost my parents early. Both of my mother and father I lost while I was at the Zen Center. And I met Trungpa Rinpoche, and I broke with Maezumi Roshi. It was very painful. I left him to go study with Trungpa. That was that, the token got broken, definitely got broken. And I went and studied in Colorado with Trungpa for many years, and then that got kind of crazy. And by that time I was in my mid-late 20s, and I realized that I actually wanted to do art. And I didn't know that before, but I was kind of tired of spiritual communities. They were all kind of messed up. There was a lot of drinking and sex, and it was crazy, and I was just tired of everything was about Trungpa. And he was charismatic and he was a wonderful teacher for me, but it was too much. And there were too many superstars in Naropa and Boulder, and I got tired of it. And I wanted to start doing art, and so I left. And I left and went back to LA, and I started studying art. So now I left, another token was broken. I left Trungpa. Now I got 2 broken tokens I'm carrying around. I'm not even doing Buddhism. I had ordained as a priest in my early 20s and with Maizumi Roshi, and I wasn't wearing my robes anymore. I defrocked. I was secular, you know. It's like everyone. I was like having a good time. I was young, you know. And now I even have a better time because I'm an artist. I'm living the kind of crazy artist life. You know, stay up all night. I had lots of energy, painting, partying, carousing, taking drugs, drinking, all that. And I loved the life of an artist. And and then I slowly came back. So you notice you kind of have to follow your own aspiration. You don't know where it's taking you, but it's kind of a mystery how this is. But as I continued on that path, I slowly kind of came back to Buddhism. And I found a Tibetan teacher, Gyaltro Rinpoche, and started doing Tibetan practices with him. And he was wonderful, delightful. He was a wonderful teacher. I was very lucky. I had good teachers. And so now I would start to bring back the token starts to come back together because I'm finding a spiritual practice which I needed to balance my artistic lifestyle. I needed something to balance that. And so June and I got married in, was it 86 or 87? 88, she always corrects me. I feel guilty because I can't remember the date. 88, we got married at the Zen Center in Los Angeles. Maizumi Roshi married us. And we moved to Hawaii. I was still trying to make a living as an artist, doing a miserable job of it, not getting by. I started an art business taking tourists out to do their own paintings for a couple years. And I wasn't, you know, wasn't making much of a living as an artist. I didn't know how to market myself. And I got a job at a computer store in Kona selling computers for about a year. And I thought I was doing pretty good. And then the boss calls me, we were on the Big Island, and the boss calls me over to Honolulu. And I thought, oh, he's calling me over to give me a raise. And he flies me over there too. So, you know, I'm feeling great, you know, but this is my life. I'm going to be a computer salesman for the rest of my life. And I'm going to make a lot of money, you know, and I'm going to sell computers, and I'm going to have my own computers, and I'll be a tech guy. I go in the office and he says, Bob, you're a terrible salesman. You're fired. I was crushed. I was really crushed. I remember going home crying, you know, I was like totally just crushed. It was like, oh my God, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. But at the time, you know, it was awful. So that's life. And I'm sure you can all relate to these kinds of stories in your own life. It would be fun if we had counsel and actually talked about this, because we all have these kind of stories. This is about growing up. And then and then the last part of the story, I don't want to go on too long about it, but people had heard that I had something to do with Zen in a long time ago, and they thought I might know something. People would ask me about how to meditate. And I give them meditation instruction, and I felt good when I gave people meditation instruction. I didn't get paid for it, but I felt good anyway. And then I went to a Sesshin with Aiken Roshi, just like we're doing here. I got into the middle of that Sesshin. I'm doing koans with Aiken Roshi, and this is really good, really good. I'm not making any money. I paid money to go to the Sesshin, just like you have. And I came home from that Sesshin and I told June, you know what? I took vows as a priest a long time ago with Maizumi Roshi, and I'm not living up to them. And I want to renew my vows. I want to go back to LA. And renew my relationship to Maizumi Roshi. And I did. Shaved my head. Sensei was always so loving and generous. She said, sure, go ahead. and I came back, and the token came together. And it's mysterious to me how life works like this, but it does. I am absolutely certain you have the same kind of stories. We have identities and roles and things we take on, and we go off the path, we come back on it. We were sharing these kind of stories with some of my Dharma brothers many years ago with my teacher in San Diego, and we all had the same kind of stories. They were crooked paths. Very few people had a straight path to where they ended up. We were crooked. Mine has been really crooked. I've been all over the place. But it was something that ran through that crooked path, an aspiration that was always there. And I think we have that kind of aspiration. And when you trust that aspirational energy in you, that is the best rudder you can have in life. And the earlier in life you find out that there's something important about that, though you might not completely trust it, the better off you'll be, because that will get you through all kinds of falling off the path, so to speak, and then you get serious about something like Zen, and you put your foot down, and that's when the path really begins. You start coming to Sesshin like this. You take this seriously. You can't just read about it. You have to do this practice. Yeah, I can tell you you're Buddha, but it won't mean anything to you unless you do this practice. And then you'll get. I'm confident you all either get this now or will get it if you practice in this way, because that's how this tradition works. That's how people have been doing this practice for thousands of years. As long as you get on the path and put your foot down and practice, then you will see the point, and you'll clarify it for yourself. I have no doubt about that at all. So that's this koan, two says. I just want to say one last final thing, a little bit about trauma, because Sensei talked about it yesterday, and that word is being thrown around a lot, and I think we need to be careful about how we use the word. Trauma has a specific meaning psychologically in terms of traditional trauma. It is generally associated with a traumatic event that happens. And my understanding of that is that when someone has a traumatic event, it might be abuse, sexually, physically, it might be being at war. And when you have a traumatic event, there's a part of your brain, I believe it's the hippocampus in your mid limbic brain, that processes events and processes them into your memory. And you have two kinds of memory, intrinsic and extrinsic. And the extrinsic memory is what your hippocampus does when you have an event. It takes it in and it puts it into your extrinsic memory, which then reorders it. You dream about it at night, you do things, and you end up with a coherent story about that experience that's meaningful to you. But what happens when someone has a traumatic event is that part of the brain, the hippocampus, shuts down. It doesn't take that experience in and integrate it, because there's other parts of the brain that are having to work harder to deal with the crisis and the trauma. So you have that experience, but it doesn't get integrated into that part of your brain that would process that memory. It stays in what we might call intrinsic memory, which always is experienced as being in the present. So now you're a soldier that comes home from a war and you've been wounded and you had a traumatic event, a bomb that went off right next to you, and I've seen this, and I saw this in Claude Thomas years ago, and he was a soldier in Vietnam. You're walking down the street and a car backfires, and your body reacts to that. You're hardwired for that. You're right back there in the war because you're experiencing that in the present. You haven't been able to integrate that trauma into the part of your memory that would be able to put it together into a meaningful story. So one of the ways, and I'm sure there are many, but I remember it was an Asian woman, Hong Wong, in California, that was doing a lot of journal work with Vietnam veterans. This seemed to help because when you journal about, or you write about something, you're starting to put things together into a narrative that you can now begin to integrate. And when you start to integrate that experience, you're addressing the trauma. That is, I think, kind of the classical notion of trauma. Now, I do think that we can make a case that there's a kind of rolling trauma happening now from the pandemic, that when people are, if you're a nurse or you're working in a hospital and you're constantly dealing with overloaded with people dying and being sick, there's a kind of stress that is happening over and over again, and that repeated event can be a kind of trauma. But we might need another word for it. So I just want to put that out, that I think we should be careful when we use the word trauma. We're all suffering. There's no doubt that we're suffering from the pandemic, and there's what I would call a social capital has gone missing. There's a lot of things that have gone missing in terms of being in community together from the pandemic, and I think we're suffering a lot of that and being isolated, but I'm not sure it's a trauma in the classical sense of the word. So just be careful when we use that word, I think. That's what I wanted to say for today. What do you think? Do those stories make sense to you that I was telling? You have stories like that too, don't you?
First and foremost.
Here, let's get the microphone, Joe. Yeah. And put the video on. Yeah. Hang on, Joe. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Well, first and foremost, I want to thank you for sharing your story there. I always love hearing stories, people's own stories, because life in general, I really do think life never works like that straight path. That wouldn't be life. It wouldn't. I don't know what that would be, but it wouldn't be life.
Yeah.
So I really love hearing that, because I really am a firm believer that things always work themselves out in time. But yeah, thank you for that vulnerability as well. And it was really crazy, because I got maybe 5 hours of sleep last night.
Oh.
I was a little sleepy coming into this today's talk.
Yeah.
And these koans just grabbed my attention like none other. They really did. I think it's so fascinating, and it's such a foreign idea to me to try to I'm really, the one thing that has been a repeated theme, and I'm really trying to wrap my head around, is this idea of emptiness. And I keep, I feel like I have little bits and pieces of it. I can certainly understand how, when you mention that the past is irrelevant, the future is irrelevant, and even to some extent too, even the present moment is a little abstract too. is this the overall idea of emptiness? Is don't view life as this concrete thing and more of just this? You mentioned a process.
Well, I think emptiness is intimacy. And you will know that from sitting here, that being intimate, not being divided from yourself. And when you can be intimate with yourself, you can be intimate with others. And I think that intimacy it's relational. Yeah? Now, if I'm projecting onto you, I won't see you. I won't be intimate with you. But if I'm able to be open in a way of not knowing, you're a new person to me. I've barely met you. And yet I see you. And what I see is beautiful. And maybe what you see is beautiful. So we see each other's, it's like I, thou. Yeah? That's intimacy. We can see this all the time. And then what do? We put something in the middle. I say, I see Joe, I see you tomorrow, and I say, oh, Joe looks upset. I think he must be angry with me. And then I projected something onto you, and I put a big piece of shit in the middle of our what was something beautiful. And it was intimate, and now it's not. I've just divided our, yeah? And we do this all the time with judgments, opinions, but when we're in retreat like this, we have the capacity, because we're practicing, to just have a glimpse for a moment of this, the possibility of really being here, of showing up and being present in some way that's authentic and vulnerable and not defended. And it's intimate. That's the teaching. It's not abstract, right? This isn't abstract. No. If we try to abstract it, we'll lose it, won't we? Yeah. Yeah.
That is so mind-blowing. I would have never guessed. I would have never thought that emptiness was actually intimacy.
Yeah.
There's such a.
Well, the word throws us. The word throws us off.
Yeah.
There's a reason why a lot of the words in Buddhism are put in the negative, because what they're trying to say by you doing that is don't attach to the word. If we called it fullness, then all of a sudden we make a concept out of it. But when you say emptiness, it's kind of like a puzzle. Emptiness? That sounds awful. Emptiness. I have an empty tank. So it makes you kind of take a second take on it. And we need to do that because we're so habituated to words and concepts. So we need to kind of,
That is so fascinating because it's so true.
Yeah.
Now that I understand it,
Yeah.
it does force you to take a second.
Yeah, because you can't understand it.
Yeah.
Wanting to understand it already gets in the way. It's all here. It's not. There's nothing hidden.
Oh wow. Okay, that's it's so true too.
You're fantastic. Yeah, well, thank you.
It's so true. That is so true. I love the definition of intimacy too.
Yeah.
Because that is so true.
Yeah.
That is so true. You can't come in with these assumptions.
No.
They're so hardwired.
No, we know it when we have it, but we can't conceptualize it. And you can't get to it through your conceptual mind either. No, you're the Buddha. You're already.
Thank you so much.
Okay. That was good. That makes my day. You probably woke up too, even though you've had 5 hours of sleep, right?
Yeah. I have all the energy.
Yeah. I know. I'll go. Still, you probably should try to take a nap this afternoon. That's also emptiness.
Yeah.
You have to take care. You have to sleep. Okay. Anyone else? Pix? Pix?
Oh, that was very wonderful exchange. I really appreciate your intimacy with Joshin. That was an intimate moment for me too. It's contagious. It expands this. Or I had a lot of trouble with emptiness, totally confused by it for decades.
Yeah,
And
I
so,
think most of us have had to go through that.
so I've come to, I think of it as this is the easier word for me. It's just this.
Yeah,
And that's just because I had to get, and now I'm okay with emptiness, like as you're speaking of it as intimacy. Oh, wow. But nobody ever said that before. You know, I'm hearing it for the first time. Joshin probably said it constantly, but I never heard it before. Anyway, the token idea is so great. It's so, and the koan, right? Whereas like she leaves a token. You can't help it. You can't help it.
Yeah.
You know, we can't help it. I think we're built to love and care, to be relational. And so we just come with a bunch of tokens and then decide, are we going to give any of them away, or we're going to give them all away, or, like, it's a great metaphor. Thank you, Joshin. Thank you.
And you're all the way in Victoria, and yet we're here together in this moment. Yeah. And we can be intimate too now this way.
Yes.
I haven't seen you for a long time. Yeah.
It's wonderful to be part of it.
Wonderful to see you.
And wonderful to be part of the Sangha. I feel very connected. It's amazing. I feel so connected to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for those of you who don't know, Pix is a wonderful artist. You've been an artist most of your life, haven't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of her pieces behind her there. Yeah. Look at that. Wow.
And they're not stencils, they're freehand. It's all about the enso and just actually doing Zen enso. And then it turned into dots, and it just turned into just circles. And yeah,
you've been doing circles all the time
for quite a long time.
A lot of ink work, right?
Yep. Yeah. It's just, thank you for that.
Pix. Wow.
Thank you. And thank you for your wonderful contribution.
Move it onto Hogetsu.
So I'm on camera.
Yeah, we all want to see you.
You mentioned broken tokens or tokens both times, which is both freeing and painful for me right now with broken tokens.
Yeah.
But put that with something else that you said that seemed uncomfortable when you mentioned it, but not so much today, is that the future is none of your business. I like that's helpful.
Well,
for me.
what I said was, once you wake up, what happens after that is none of your business.
Yeah, okay.
You don't need to keep looking for more insights.
Right. Okay. But I guess I interpreted that and heard another word, but it's helpful that, you're here, and once you realize that you're here and it's just this, investing a lot of energy in what you want to have as next and what tokens you want to bring back together, as if you have any control over that, can create a lot of suffering. And
Yes, it can.
sitting with, like the father there, sitting with, in some sense, a broken token, and in some sense not, is very revealing for me and helpful. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. You know, waking up is enough, but life will always throw curveballs at us. And, we shouldn't make anything too absolute. I mean, we are going to use our will and our agency to do things, but from the larger perspective, it's really grace is what it's about. When we wake up, then we're kind of trusting the universe is going to carry us along, and you find that it does in some mysterious way. And it doesn't mean you won't suffer. It doesn't mean you won't have anxiety or depression or whatever, but in the larger scheme of things, it's not about your willpower so much. It's more, like Sensei said, it's really about getting out of the way. And because when you're in the way, that's what's creating the suffering. That's what's dividing. And so to be able to, I think when you see the point, when you get what this teaching, when you are liberated by this teaching, it's more than enough. And then grace takes over.
There was something else too, I think it was from today, the idea of identity and grasping on to a particular identity.
Yeah.
So I might proudly say, I am a matriarch.
Uh-huh.
And I have the power of being the matriarch. No, I'm not. I am what I am at this moment, in both for myself and my relationships with others, and right now, and that's, as you say, that's enough. That's what it is. And the suffering that comes from claiming an identity and then expecting the world to cooperate with that identity in the way I've decided that the world should be relating to me, can create lots of grief.
Lots of grief.
Lots of grief.
Tons of grief. Truckloads
for me and
of
for
grief.
others.
Truckloads of grief.
Yeah.
Yeah. Think of the father in this story. Look what he went through. He lost his daughter. Daughter is basically in a coma. You remember what's that like for a father to have, or a mother to have you know about that. You don't have much control over that.
And he didn't go chasing after her.
He didn't.
He didn't.
No.
And you know, it's when I have wise advice to say, no, you don't do anything, except I do the loving kindness prayer for all of my family.
It's hard, I think, as a parent to see your children suffer, and it's hard. Sometimes you have to let people suffer and learn what they need to learn, because that's their karma, so to speak, and you really don't have anything to do with that. But that's actually good news. It means that you're not to blame for it. You don't also have to take responsibility for their suffering the way that you thought you had to, and that's freeing for a parent. That your kids have their own destiny, they have their own karma. It's not all your responsibility. You raised them, you brought them up, you did your job as a parent. Now they're in the world. That's their responsibility what they do.
And how many years was it from when you left Meizumi Roshi until you came back? Because I was thinking about him too in your story.
It was about 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Robert was
Maybe
gone.
15, maybe 15. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I came back, and I love Maizumi Roshi. I was never as intimate with him when I came back as I was in the early years. It had changed a little bit. He didn't trust me quite completely. There wasn't unconditional. Expecting unconditional love is somewhat unrealistic, but we had a good relationship at the end, and I would not have been complete if I had not come back to him. Something would have really been broken for me. So I'm grateful that life worked out that way. And now he's passed, so there's nothing I could do now. But and it's kind of a mystery to me how life goes like that. We have some control, and there's a lot of things that we don't have control over. I really think it's a mystery, and we should just accept that life is, we don't have to figure out the mystery. In fact, Zen is to make the mystery more apparent, maybe. Let things be mystery. That's the kind of the grace I'm talking about, is that you kind of trust there's something here that's working under there's that phrase in the sutra this morning, there's light in the darkness, but don't go looking for it. And there's darkness in the light, but don't go looking for that. Light and darkness are a pair, like the foot before and the foot behind in walking. They fit ordinary life like a box in its lid. That's a beautiful poem about this kind of grace of emptiness, that these two things are working together. They're married. They're always working together, but we keep trying to pull them apart to understand them. And there's really nothing you can understand here. So it's a kind of faith and a grace of letting go of needing to nail it down. Or every time you try to nail it down, you're abstracting it, you're pulling it out of the living fabric of what it is. And that living fabric is a mystery and a grace. And that's why I think much of practice is really about faith and trust in the mystery of life and how things work out. Things are working out unconsciously too, at a level that we're not aware of. We dream every night, and we're doing stuff in our dreams that we forget about when we wake up. So we are deep reservoirs of sanity.
I never heard that phrase.
I didn't either. I never heard that before.
No, I just said I'd never heard that phrase before.
You'll probably never hear it again. It just flew away. There's that story, the Zen master is out walking with a student, and the ducks are on the pond, and they scare them, and the ducks are flying off, and the Zen master says, oh, and the Zen master asks the student, what is that? And the student says, that's the ducks flying away. And the Zen master reaches over and pulls his nose and says, when have they ever flown away? So there's this aspect of this truth of our true nature, which is no coming and going. This doesn't come and go. You see? This intimacy, it doesn't come and go. It's not in time. It's not in space. It's a mystery. Can we just accept the mystery and the beauty of it? Then we can have it. It's yours. You can claim it, but you got to keep practicing because we'll forget. I'll forget. I have to do sesshins because I will forget. I forget this. That's why I do sesshin still, because just for this This is liberation.
Likewise.
Yeah.
It seems to me, you know, especially coming in with the mindset of knowing absolutely nothing.
You're way ahead of the game. And now the next time you come, you're going to be way behind. You're going to know something. The first Sesshin is the best.
Yeah, no, it really is. It really is. It really, to me, it just seems like a lot of it is just, or a big portion of it is, just in general, to go into life with this mindset of stop, or at least trying to turn down the volume to that side of our mind that always is trying to either control, to understand, to, you mentioned earlier, just nail anything down. Anytime you try to nail anything down, there's that intrinsic part of our mind.
Yeah. We're sticky.
Yeah,
We
and
stick
that's
to
the
things.
sticky, yeah.
We're reaching for stuff. You know, greed, anger, and ignorance are the three poisons. And you can see, we're all hungry ghosts.
Yeah.
We're all grabbing for something, that shiny object, whatever it is, and we do it. And I think it's important to accept that even when you see the point, and when you're liberated by this practice, you're still going to have a sticky mind. So that's why we have to practice, because if you don't practice, if you don't keep practicing, we're creatures of habits, and the habits are very deep. They run, you know, when we chant that Gatha in the morning, all the evil karma ever committed by me since of old on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, it's beginningless. That's saying it's very deep. The karma runs deep, and we are creatures of habits, and we will go back to those habits. So when you practice, you're creating a new kind of habit, and you have to keep practicing, because samsara, the world, is very seductive, and we're seduced by it, and we end up sticking to something. There's a lot of fear in the world right now, a lot of fear, a lot of uncertainty. Threat of violence is just right there. And so we're all wondering what's going to happen tomorrow. And we can't help but wonder what's going to happen tomorrow or the next election. Are we going to have a civil war in America? Are we going to? We don't know. So there's all that. And when you start watching the news, so we have to practice. We have to practice so that the noise starts to be in the background, and what's actually important is in the foreground. If we don't practice, the noise it takes over. It's loud, you know. A few loud voices dominate everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the culture doesn't love wisdom in general, so you're not going to get a lot of reinforcement for this practice from the news.
No.
Yeah, don't watch the news. Just stay at home and be bored, and we won't get any ratings for our news channel. Don't turn us on. Just sit with yourself and be at home with your true nature. Yeah, you're not going to get that message from any of the media.
No. Actually, yeah, I was going to say too, honestly, I've tried to avoid, I still occasionally.
It's really toxic.
But for the most part, yeah, any source of any TV, honestly, ignorance can't be bliss.
I'm a news junkie and I can't watch it. It's too toxic now.
Yeah.
Either side, there are people pulling things out of context and exaggerating and demonizing each other, and people behaving poorly.
Exactly. Well, it's like, what's the end game? You know, like when you keep polarizing that much, I mean, what is the end game? You're never going to shout someone to agree with you.
Yeah. So we could go on with this subject, and we're going to actually start moving into politics and the things that we usually do, which is okay. But let's remember where we are right now, that we have this moment. We're in this container, and it's going to end soon. and it's very precious, the container we're in right now. So let's hold the container, and we can go deeper. We can still go deeper. We got a few days, and then we'll go in all directions. We'll be coming and going. We'll be waving. We'll be doing the wave. But until then, let's trust stillness, because stillness is unconditional. Yeah, we'll get to
something that popped up when you were saying maybe the world isn't interested in wisdom or not ready for it. But when I bring some of that stillness into the world, it's noticed.
Mm-hmm.
Like at the grocery store,
Yeah.
when there's a line and somebody says, "You're so calm." And I said, "I'm just standing. I'm not waiting. I'm standing."
Uh-huh.
Oh, maybe I'll try that. Or, just chaos. I'm also clergy person, and sometimes it's busy. And or when I've been in the hospital, and I'm just calm. I'm the non-anxious presence. It's noticed.
Yes.
And it may have an effect on someone. So those little ripples.
Yeah, you
So
can
without
help
even
others.
going into the mess of the world, entering into the world grounded in a practice of just this, of stillness, can change the world.
Absolutely. Yes,
We don't know how, but it's
No,
we don't have an
under-
idea of exactly what it's going to
Well,
do.
don't underestimate the power
Right.
of a calm person in the midst of a storm to help others without any words. Yeah. Thank you, Hogan. It's good. We've gone past the time. We're supposed to be, we're off schedule now. Sensei and I are going to a bearing witness retreat with the Lakotas in about 3 weeks, and they don't use clocks. They're on Indian time. We can't even, it's hard to have a schedule because we have to know where we're going to meet, but we don't even know when we're going to all get there together at the same time. So, but we're on a schedule. We're not on Indian time. We're on Germanic time. The clock. So my clock says it's time for lunch. So thank you. Thank you, Pix. Good to see you. See you later.